I want you to imagine it's 1878, and you're a young 28-year-old scientist named Konstantin Fahlberg, working at Johns Hopkins on coal tar extracts. You head for home to have dinner, and you spot a bit of something on the back of your fingers. So, being an evolved ape, you lick it, or otherwise put your hand in your mouth. There's an intensely sweet flavor, and you think, that's odd. You've just discovered saccharin, or anhydroorthosulfamine benzoic acid, a substance over 200 times sweeter than cane sugar. Congratulations, it will revolutionize the sweetener industry by starting a new class of substances that are sweet without the same calories as sugars. It will also kick off a search for other similar substances that continues today. We'll come back to saccharin in a minute. Flash forward to 1937 at the University of Illinois. Graduate student Michael Zveda puts down his cigarette because, yes, he was smoking in the research lab, a common practice until the 1970s. He was working on antipyretics or anti-fever medications, but what ended up on his cigarette was a substance called sodium cyclamate, brand name Sugar Twin. Another lab, another day, 1965. James Schlatter, working for a company looking for stomach ulcer medication. He was leafing through some lab papers, licked his finger, and the result was aspartame, brand name NutraSweet. On to 1976, where a young Indian-born scientist, Shashikant Fadnis, was evaluating new chemicals for use in research products. His boss asked him to test a particular chlorinated form of sucrose. He misunderstood and instead tasted what would become sucralose, brand name Splenda. Anyone else noticing a theme? I suspect the next big sweetener is waiting to be discovered on the back of someone's lab book. I suggest any of you out there that work in labs begin tasting every spill and stain on the bench. Let's jump back to saccharin. Initially, it was recognized that it could benefit diabetics, and its low cost made it competitive with cane sugar, although many dislike the bitter aftertaste. U.S. President Teddy Roosevelt was quite a fan and user, and when the predecessor of the FDA proposed regulation on the use of saccharin as a cheap substitute for sugar, Teddy stepped in and formed his own scientific board to review the safety of saccharin. The board returned a positive bill of health, and saccharin remained in use thanks to presidential intercession. Saccharin became very popular following sugar rationing during World War II, and post-war America continued to use saccharin as both a low-cost and low-calorie option. Everything was great until the 1970s, when tests of the sweetener showed evidence of increased risk of bladder cancer in rats. There were immediate calls to ban the substance, but since it was the only diet sweetener on the market, it was left available, but with a warning label. And so the world decided that saccharin was a carcinogen. The labels made that very clear, and our memories are long on such things. Saccharin causes cancer. You knew that, right? In late 2000, those labels were removed. They were removed because saccharin doesn't cause cancer in humans, like it does in rats. Rats have some distinctive urinary characteristics that make them susceptible to saccharin's effects. They excrete protein complexes and calcium phosphate in their urine. The saccharin was being excreted, but at high pH, it was forming precipitates, and this irritated the bladder lining, which resulted in a slight increase in bladder cancer. If you have a pet rat, do not allow them to drink saccharin. What about humans, though? No linkage to human cancers has ever been well demonstrated for saccharin. When the unique properties of rat urine are taken into account, it appears to be harmless in them as well. Most importantly, for a possible carcinogen, saccharin doesn't interact with DNA. It's not a mutagen, the mechanism by which most artificial substances promote cancer. Admittedly, I hate the taste of saccharin, as do a lot of people. It has that terrible bitter aftertaste, and the flavor is just a little too fake tasting. But even though it's made from coal tar, it's about as safe as the sugar that's extracted from giant piles of cane grass. Switch focus to a more recent addition to the low-calorie sweetener market in the US, stevia, or stevia if you prefer. Stevia is a natural product extracted from a family of shrubs and herbs. The key ingredient, a class of compounds called steviol glycosides or steviosides, are hundreds of times sweeter than sucrose, yet contribute very few calories and can actually be anti-inflammatory and have a positive effect on regulating blood sugar. I want very much to love this sweetener, but there's a catch. Unlike saccharin, some or all steviol glycosides are known to interact with DNA. Not much, mind you, and stevia has been repeatedly cleared for carcinogenic activity, but it possesses the mutagenic potential that saccharin does not. I'm not saying it's bad, I'm saying that escalating doses of it will have escalating risks, where saccharin has a relatively flat risk. I want to kick off this video with a short discussion of the appeal to nature fallacy. You couldn't wish for a better example of it. Saccharin, which is made from oily coal residue, is the epitome of artificial and chemical. Stevia, which is a fairly crude extract of a leaf that has been used safely by people in South America and Japan for decades, is the epitome of natural products. And yet their origins in the lab or the forest make no difference in determining their safety. Ultimately, we may conclude that stevia is a much safer product than saccharin, or that they're both safe. But it's not where they come from that determines this. Carcinogens, mutagens, and toxins are found everywhere in nature. Perfectly safe substances can be made from petroleum, coal tar, or industrial wastes. It's wrong to assume the other way as well. Not every sweet-tasting stain on a lab notebook is going to turn out to be a boon for mankind. But until we empirically test something for safety, there is no way to generalize based entirely on where we found it. There is an element of vitalism in this argument, a belief in the immaterial essence of something. An artificial substance will carry with it the essence of something from the harsh lights and acrid smells of the lab, where a natural substance carries only the warm sunshine and soft earth. A simple reality check on substances like tobacco, mycotoxins, and poison dart frogs will dispel this. There's another application of the appeal to nature fallacy, and that's the argument from evolution fallacy. It's tempting to say that because we evolved to eat nuts and roots, that this diet is optimal for our biology. It sometimes happens that this is true, that natural selection has weeded out undesirable traits or behaviors, or eliminated toxins, or that our physiology adapted to compensate for some external force. On the other hand, natural selection is a very poor innovator. It's just as happy with a good enough solution to a problem as to the optimal solution. It's a hallmark of evolution that it never invents, it only adapts existing structures to new tasks. So it's not a reasonable argument that natural selection validates a diet or behavior as being optimal. With this perspective in mind, let's examine just a few of the major low-calorie sweeteners. Unfortunately, there are so many non-caloric sweeteners that I've had to narrow the field. I've selected aspartame, sucralose, stevia, acesulfame potassium, and some common sugar alcohols as examples. We'll have to keep the details to a minimum to keep this short. Citations in the underbar. Before we start, I want to discuss the generalized benefits of low-calorie sweeteners. 1. It seems a bit redundant, but they're low-calorie. Unlike HFCS or sucrose, they don't contribute to an excess of sugar calories, which presumably means that consuming the same portion contributes less to caloric excess, which can contribute to obesity. 2. They have a low glycemic index. With the notable exception of sugar alcohols, which we will get to, low-calorie sweeteners don't cause blood sugar spikes, which is important for people with blood sugar dysregulation. 3. Here's a big one. They don't contribute to bacterial erosion of tooth enamel, so dental health is improved. I could add lower cost here, but I personally don't think that's the case to the consumer anymore. Intense sweeteners have become associated with more expensive diet forms of popular products. What about the possible generic risks to any sweetener? 1. Overcompensation. This is a big one, and very controversial right now in the research community. People may, and I emphasize may, give themselves permission to eat foods bad for them if they also consume a product perceived as diet or low calorie. Think of someone on a weight reduction diet who orders a Diet Coke with their McDonald's triple cheeseburger and large fries. They might buy the Diet Coke and justify the rest because they're cutting back on calories on the soda. The research to date has found very little evidence of this. Most studies support the use of low-calorie sweeteners for weight loss, but there are a few, especially on non-human models, that show a paradoxical weight gain, and the cause is not entirely clear. 2. Addiction to sweetness. Low-calorie sweeteners reinforce our brain's demand for sweeter flavors. This might mean that we prefer foods with harsher additive-derived flavors,